first things I got to do for this holster to get a new loop made, I don't have an old one to go by, so I have to try to get some measurements off of this one. I've already done this, but I'm going to walk you through it just because I wasn't going to do a video on it, but I will. Need to find out the thickness of the leather that's already being used on the holster. I'm going to go with the main body. This is one big piece that goes all the way down, and it comes down, let's see, it's one piece that comes down and around here and is the whole back, and then there's this flap that goes over the front, and this is, if memory serves me correctly, this is for like a Walther PPK. It's much smaller than a Luger. I don't have a PPK blue gun. Someday I'll probably have to get one, but they're pretty cool. These button studs are neat. They're actually riveted on with the washer in the back, which is pretty darn cool. We're having a little hot spell here in southern Minnesota. So I have my clockwise thickness gauge. This is nice because it's just digital and I have it set to measure in millimeters. We've got a chart right here that converts ounces to inches or millimeters. I prefer to use millimeters. It's just, I don't know, the Germans probably would have used it. So, and you're almost never going to get exactly the right thickness, but so I want to get as close as I can. This is 2.2 millimeters. Measure a couple of different spots. 2.27, 2.3, 1.59. So the flat part, originally this flap piece came around to the back and stitched on here. We're not going to do anything with that. Again, this is part of the history of this holster, that this modification was done. Probably a very high wear area, and it's certainly functional the way it is, and my customer didn't want to do anything with it, so I'm not gonna. And I'm gonna try to do some sketches of this holster just because I want to be able to reproduce it at some point. A friend of mine has a really nice PPK, World War II era, that he doesn't have a holster for. And this one's got name in there and stuff like that. So it is kind of cool. It's got some history, but I want to get some measurements. So I'm going to take my ruler and I want to measure the width. And since I can see really well where the imprint of the old holster was, I can get it. It is, looks like it's 48 centimeters or millimeters, excuse me, 48 millimeters. I'm going to make it 50. Yep, same on the bottom. To get, and this is going to loop up and come down. So to get that measurement, I'm just going to take a piece of leather that's the same thickness as what I'm using, and I'm going to stick that right there, and it folds over, so I'll hold it there, and then I'll just make a mark down here, and that gives me my length, my pretty darn close length. And that is like 117 millimeters. I'm going to make sure you've got some leather that's close as I can possibly get. 2.1 is about the best I got. Might check a couple other smaller pieces that I've got stashed around. Let's see if I can find something just a tick thicker. Alright, let's cut one out of here first. I'm just gonna, I know that this edge is straight because I just cut it. You always want to start with a good straight edge. That's 50 millimeters wide. So I also have my square and a straight edge so that I can make darn sure I've got a good straight edge up here. I'm going to grab a different blade though, because this one's junk. So I'm using this ruler so that I can butt my straight edge. I can butt the leather up against the ruler, and then I can take my square and put that up against there and make sure that I now have a nice square corner. And grab our pencil. We'll come down from there. 117 millimeters. I'm just making a pencil mark there, and I'll do the same thing to cut it. Except this time I'm going to line my triangle or tri-square or square or whatever you want to call it right up on that edge. There's that. Now this piece I'm going to use to test my dies on so that I can try to match mostly the die on the back. Here it's been a little protected, so I want to make sure I've got something a little darker like this tone. And there's that one. I will do exactly the same thing again with the thinner one. Alright, this is kind of a trial and error deal. I can take a little, I've got some light brown, dark brown, and walnut. I think the walnut is going to be too dark. I'm just going to try a little straight up dark brown. And it has to soak in, kind of do its thing there. And I'm going to try a little, I always try to shake a little bit so I can get the solids off the bottom mixed back in. Get a little walnut, try that. The walnut, what I'm seeing here, the dark brown has a little bit of a, is on this side, has a little bit of a reddish tinge to it, which is really similar to the holster. And once that dries, I may be right on the money too. It's tough to say at this point. So at this, you know, this is one of those moments. I'll just run a strip of light brown in there too. And I can try to gauge which one's going to look the closest. I want to match this, mostly this color down here, which a dark brown looks really, really close. And sometimes if you need to take and get a little more of that reddish tint, I'll take a light brown and I'll use just a touch of mahogany in there, because that mahogany's got that red tint to it, a reddish color to it. The walnut is definitely not the right color. If I was up in here, I would take my light brown and put just a touch of dark brown in with it. I want to match this color here as close as possible, and I think from what I'm seeing here, that dark brown is going to be the ticket. I went around and I went and dyed it, and I went around with the number 3 out in edger. It seemed to give me about the right bevel around there, because it's not, I just want to knock that edge off. I don't want to really bevel it. The number 3 took and kind of rounded that off a little, and that's all I really wanted. But I do see my little black spot there, so I'm going to quick cut another one of these, do the same thing with it, and I'll just use this one as a sample piece, I guess. The loop's going to bend up here, and it'll go on like this. So I'll have to mark all my stitch holes as well, and that I'm going to have to do also. But this one is not gonna, but it'll be good to see if the color is gonna be right. And see what I have to do to tinker with that color to make it spot on. This piece, my sample piece, it looks pretty good. This is the dark brown, so it looks pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty darn good. I may have to put a couple coats on it, not a big deal. But I want it to dry good first and see, once it's dry, when you bend it, you're going to leave a light, it's going to be light there, so you'll have to dye it after I bend it. We'll see. And I know that that's little circle falls right on that bend. You'll never see it, but I know it's there. So I'm going to go ahead and cut another piece, and we'll get her done. When I'm doing a belt loop like this, there's always a lot of trial and error that goes into it. So right now, this is where I'm at. This is the one I'm going to go with. I think it's a reasonable match between the darker part and the lighter part. So that's the one I'm going to go with. I've got it all just about ready to stitch down. I need to put a couple of grooves. I wanted to show you a tool that works pretty slick for that. If you watch my channel for a while, you've seen this before. And I'll burnish with these parts in here, but I don't know how well the camera will pick that up. You can see the offset where the top part's darker, higher than the sides. That's for doing grooves. And I need to put a groove in here, just a decorative groove. So I'm going to try it here. A crease, I guess we call that. Sometimes I don't remember everything all the time. So that's what it'll do. And it looks about where I need it. I need it thicker though. So let me see if I can find my creaser, and we'll try it then. Alright, this is a 2mm creaser. This is also an Odin tool. Let's see how that one looks. Well, it is definitely closer to the edge than I need to be. I need to be farther away, like the other groove is. So I'm going to go with that one. This tool. And that should give me what I want. I wonder. Oh, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want. Now the bummer about this tool is you can't heat it up. Let's make another one here. Yeah, I think that's going to be perfect. Glad I caught that. I'm just going to have to work it a little harder than I would normally have to work a creaser. I think that looks pretty good. So I'm ready to make some holes. I'm going to do my top ones first, because that'll help hold this in place. I had done one where I started to do the bottom holes first, and that was no bueno. So we're going to do the top holes first. That'll hold everything in place for me to do the bottom holes. Kinda-ish. I'll have to try something to hold that, maybe some Ted's tape, just to hold that down while I punch the holes. And then I can pick it up, take the tape off. Yeah, wish I could get a clamp in there somehow. Alright, well, let me see what I can do here. Get at least, I want to at least get the top stitched on. Be using a linen thread, about the same as this. And this is a 7-cord. It's a 1-pound spool. It's a big spool of thread. I am never going to go through this probably in my lifetime, but you never know. The thread is just slightly, ever so slightly tinted brown. So I'm going to try to just give it that little bit of tint. And we'll go from there. First, I gotta get the holes punched in here somehow. The top ones are going to be the easiest ones to do, because I can get at all of them. I should have a different kind of block to put behind it, but this is what I got. I don't like having anything back there. I like to see where my holes are going. Now I can at least stick a couple of these in. through that hole there, buddy. Why is it not going through there? If I talk to myself enough, it'll probably work, right? Alright, well, at least I have 2 pins in here to help hold it. As I go, try to hold the rest of it. Punch a few more holes. The answer to get this through the needle, after I wax it, I try to flatten that out a little bit. Cut it nice and clean. Because when it's round thread, most braided threads are not. This is not a braided thread. So, I'm going to go with that end. And all of my thread that I use for this kind of stuff is all the same way. I do not remember where this thread came from, where I got it from. Well, I do, kinda. I don't know where it came from. I know where I got it from. Dang it. There we go. So when I tie these off, I'm going to tie them off underneath, between the layers. That's how it should have been done originally. It's hard to tell where it was done all. So that is the way I'm going to do it. So this stitch line has a lot more holes in it. I don't know if that's because it was restitched once before and they used different holes. I don't know why it's got so many more holes in it. But the 2 stitch lines kind of follow each other and they kind of make a curve this way just a little bit and they get narrower here. I'm going to have to try to duplicate that because that's the way the stitch holes are. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to make 1 hole down on this end, put a pin in it, and then maybe 2, I don't know, maybe 2, and do the same on the other end, and then try to do punch the rest of the holes. And that is about the best way I can think of to do this and keep everything lined up. These pins are indispensable when you're doing some assembly work like this. A lot of times I have the old belt loop and I can use that to make my holes. And it's the preferred way to do it because I know I'm going exactly where they were. For this, it gets a little tricky because now I have to keep everything lined up. And I gotta kind of hold things apart so that I can get in there. I don't know how well that's going to work. I think I'm just going to pick another random one here. I probably could have used a little bit of contact cement in there to hold this in. But this is the way I'm going to have to do it. I don't like that this stitch line is so many holes so close together. I think it takes away from the strength. Oh, it's such going to be a difficult place to get into. I may just go and do my stitch holes up to this point where I can get at them easy, because this is going to be in my way, so I'm going to have to kind of manipulate things. I might stitch it up to this point and hold it there, and then leave my needles connected to my thread, and then go on with it. That may be the best way to do it. 100% not sure. And some of these stitch holes are obviously additions, as I'm sitting here and able to actually look at it. So there the two threads come between the two layers of leather. We can tie a good tight square knot. Trim that off. Now we'll just take an awl. Just gotta get it under there so we can't see it anymore. So that's kind of what it looks like there. Did the same on the top. I want to hammer down my thread. Oops, I didn't move you too much. So I'm going to put my Odin puck down here and just that makes a good backing because it's just solid steel. And there we go. I need to, I'm going to let this rest because I've done a lot of finagling with the leather here. And then I'm going to use some Connolly's on it, especially on the loop. Need something. I'll use some Connolly's on these old holsters. I don't use anything that, if I don't know what's in it, I don't use it. Connolly's is primarily lanolin. So lanolin isn't, you know, it's natural. It's not going to hurt anything. It comes from sheep, sheep's wool. So that's what I'm going to use on it. I don't ever recommend anything but lanolin on something like this. Need to find try to tint this a little bit too to the color of this thread. But that is going to be for tomorrow. Alright, so I took a little bit of, there isn't much in here, very small amount because I don't need a lot. I took, it's about 3/4 of it is just isopropyl alcohol. I better put the lid on that before I spill that. And just a little bit of light brown dye. And that's how I came up with, you know, I look at this thread here, the thread along here, and I try to find a happy medium in there. And came up with this. I think that looks pretty good, especially since it's near this thread and they're pretty close. I still have to go over it with some Connolly's and kind of, you know, just kind of buff things out a little bit after all the manipulation. It's been a few days. I usually let it sit for at least a day after I work on them. But I still have to do the inside, and that is just going to be just about as simple. I do use a fairly dry brush, so there's not a lot of the mixture on here. And I just carefully, because you don't want to get it on the rest of the holster, you just want it on the thread. So just very carefully apply it to the thread itself. Which is why I keep the brush dry. Now I'm noticing my brush is developing a weird tip. I want to keep my tip as sharp as I can. So you want to grab a good scissors. I'm just going to do this over the floor. What I'm doing is I'm just taking this brush and I'm kind of keeping a really steep angle. I want all the stray bristles away so I can keep as much of a point there as I can. So I got a good point. Get back to this. And just very carefully. There we go. It's hard to show it to you because of where it's at. Well, the top ones I can. Top ones you can see pretty well. Just wanted to give them a little color. Now, of course, I've got just plain alcohol here to clean out my brush. Not that I really care. I buy these cheap brushes. They wind up being 2 or 3 cents a piece. And that's pretty much what I use for doing this. But there we go. I'm going to get my Connollys out. I'm going to apply some Connollys, get everything moisturized again, and get it ready to ship. Because, well, I'll at least send pictures to my customer. Because we're done. So this holster had some holes that were punched in it and something was riveted in. I can't do anything about the marks on the inside where the rivets were because they had a washer there. It left a mark, and there's nothing I can do about that. But on the back side here, what I did is I made some little plugs to go in there, and I think they turned out pretty darn good. They're not absolutely perfect, but they do look, I mean, for all intents and purposes, they look pretty darn good. You almost can't tell they're there. There is one right there, and another one here, and the other 2 are underneath the loop. You can't see those. But one of the things my customer wanted to do was hope this loop would hide those holes. It does hide 2 of them, and I just kind of made some plugs and matched them as best I could here with some of the test pieces that I did when I was, I think I did 1, 2, there's 3, 4, 5. I made 6 test pieces to get the color the way I wanted it. After applying some Connollys hide care, I think we got a winner. I think it turned out really nice. Hopefully my customer will think so too. I will send him some pictures of this this evening after I go back in the house. There we go. Another holster wrapped up. All I did was a belt loop. But I had to make that belt loop from scratch. I had to try to get my colors to come out nice. Knowing what your products are going to do. If I take a belt loop that's this color with some, patina added to it from, if you take them and you kind of scrunch them up a little bit, you'll get some color in there. There's no pull up to this leather to speak of, but it will change the color as you crumple it up a little bit. And then knowing what your finishes are going to do. I just used some Connollys hide care on here, but I knew that it would darken over here a little bit, and it down in the bottom, I knew it would get just a little bit darker while leaving some of this lighter. A lot of these pieces got darker from just use, from sweat, perspiration, and stuff gets on there, and it'll darken the leather. So I think it turned out pretty good. I did make the plugs that are in back here to plug those holes. I hope my customer likes that. It wasn't part of the quote that I gave him, but we'll see what he says. So, all that being said, if you want to see more of this kind of content, please let me know down below. Leave a comment. And I'll keep going with it. Otherwise, I think I'm going to take a little different direction, do some projects that are new projects. Well, not necessarily new, but products that I sell. And I'm going to do some of those beginner videos I've been talking about in the past. I want to do a beginner series. And I've pretty much got everything I need for that. I did have a subscriber that sent me some patterns of his to offer up as well. So we're going to have those too. And thank you to that subscriber. He knows who he is. I don't like saying names on the video, but you know, you'll probably see him in the comments. And with that being said, I'm going to get out of here. Got work to do. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and God bless.